Well, welcome. My name is Megan King. I'm proudly part of Scholars for Syria, and we're so happy to welcome all of you all here today. A lot of new faces and old friends too. So we're so honored to have you all here with us today. First, a little housekeeping things. Please help yourself. There's all kinds of delicious food, Mana, and some very delicious hummus and desserts that I won't even try to pronounce. All super good, totally for free, all the food down here. And then also, we have merchandise available for purchase. And all of the merchandise funds will be donated to the Karam Foundation today. So we first want to welcome our wonderful speaker for the night. Lina is here from the Karam Foundation. So she's going to speak with us a little bit about their work first, and then we'll move into what we call our Syrian stories, an opportunity for our Syrian seniors, a few of them, to talk about their experience here at the University of Evansville. So we're so happy to have you all join us. So without further ado, Lina Sergie Attar is a Syrian American architect and writer from Aleppo. She is founder and CEO of the Karam Foundation. In 2007, Lina developed the vision of Karam, which means generosity in Arabic. Since 2011, she has directed Karam in its focus on the Syrian humanitarian crisis, developing an innovative educational program for Syrian refugee youth, distributing aid to Syrian refugee families, and funding projects initiated by Syrians for Syrians. So please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much, Megan. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Before I start, I wanted to thank the University of Evansville for inviting me to be with you tonight. It's an extreme privilege and honor to be here, and I want to most of all thank Gail Vignoli for inviting me and for being so warm in her invitation, and in the communications with her, I really began to learn about what you've all done here as a university and as a town, and I'm really overwhelmed with gratitude, because I was just telling the two Syrian girls earlier that Noor and Aya, that usually when I go speak at anywhere in the past 8 years, it's either to speak to a group of people that don't really know what's going on in Syria and try to move them to act, or I'm speaking to a group of Syrians, and this is a very different situation where I'm actually speaking to people who you all have decided to care and do something in the face of the largest humanitarian crisis of our lifetime, and what you have done is very extraordinary. 23 Syrian students have been part of your community here at the university. That's amazing, and hearing about local businesses partnering up with the Islamic Center to fundraise, and everybody coming together to sell products and fundraise to get scholarships and funding for the students, and investing really in Syria's future. It makes me feel very, very proud to be here, and I want to salute Gail for her efforts, because it really becomes a proof of how one person can change so much. And that's what all of us can do. And so I'm really here, thankful to be here with you. You created home. I'm going to be speaking tonight about home and many of its manifestations, but you actually have done one of the manifestations that I experienced, which is creating home as a community. The students with their new community, with people that embrace them, and this is really what it's all about, and what it's about, I believe, to be American, and what it's about, what it means to be human. And so thank you for having me here and for doing all of this. I'm going to start today. Let me get the clicker here, which I didn't try out.
Do you want the lights out?
Yes, the light's a little bit dimmer would be great.
Do you know how?
You might have to point it up there.
I don't think it's
Oh, I have to point it here.
See this thing hanging from the ceiling?
No.
Oh, this. I could just do it right here. That's fine. Okay, so this is me when I graduated from University of Aleppo many years ago. I'm from Aleppo originally. I was born in New York City, and my parents are both doctors, and they came here like many Syrian doctors and engineers that graduated from Syria and came to the United States because they want to build a better future for themselves that was not available to them in Syria. And I was born in New York, and when I was 12 years old, we lived in a very small town, probably the size of Evansville, in upstate New York, and when I was 12 years old, my father decided we had to move back to Aleppo and live there, and that's where I went to school, and I actually went to university, and I studied architecture there in the University of Aleppo. And when I graduated, I've always had held on to my American side, and I wanted to come back to America to study for graduate school. So I went to the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island. And those of you who don't know RISD, it's actually one of the most liberal design and art schools in the world. And so it was a huge difference between University of Aleppo and going to RISD. So this is an image of me at my drawing desk at RISD. And the first day that I went to school there at Design Studio, I went in, and on every single one of our drawing tables there was a 25-pound bag of clay with one instruction on it that said, make a joint. And in my mind, I just felt like this was this impossible thing, making a joint, which in my mind I felt like I needed cardboard, I needed wood, I needed metal, I needed something rigid to actually build this joint, because I could only think of a joint in one way. And the people around me, the kids around me and students were going about, making their projects and creating things, and they had these ideas, and they were speaking a language that I didn't even know that language even existed. And they spoke with such confidence and about their ideas, even if they were, impossible and inconceivable, and their professors, were more like mentors, and they were listening to them and uplifting them and validating their ideas, and they really saw the world in a whole other way than I did. And so those of you who are teachers in the room know the students like me. In that moment, I wanted to become as small as possible. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do, I didn't know what to think, and I didn't want anybody to ask my opinion, and I kind of wanted nobody to notice I was even there. And that's kind of how I was for the next 6 months, of just absorbing how the world was and how different it was than how I was taught to think in Syria. And with time, I too began to believe in my ideas and began to speak with more confidence and began to think in a different way and eventually see the world in a different way. And I always talk about this experience at RISD, the 3 years where I went in one person and I came out another person. And I call it that, I always say that I felt like my brain was being rewired. And now we know that many teachers and many educators know that this is called brain plasticity, and that and it's the growth mindset. It's but I felt it personally, and I want to ask all of you: do you remember have had that moment where somebody in your life or some experience in your life really shifted the way you think of what you knew and what you would begin to believe? Can you raise your hand if you've had that experience? Yeah. It's really, really powerful to have that experience. And we can literally change our minds. And I think about this a lot when we work with Syrian refugee kids in Turkey and with the youth, because that kind of understanding what a mindset is and how that you can actually change people's mindsets becomes an extremely powerful tool when you're working with a population that has lost so much and has been through so many traumatic experiences, that there is a way out. This is not how I usually start my talks on Syria. Over the past 8 years, my talks and panels and other people's talks that I've attended, and really everything on Syria that you see in the media, usually starts with an image like this one. This is Aleppo, images of extreme destruction, images of mass displacement. This is Zaatari camp, probably in 2013 or so. Now it's home to still over 80,000 people, 8 years later. Images of mass displacement and the exodus to Europe, and people risking their lives to cross the Mediterranean to get from Turkey to Greece, many of them losing their lives, and really images of just extreme despair. And that's really what we've seen as represented Syria for over 8 years now. And I've shown these images. These are kind of the way of showing, okay, this is what's happening. Nobody's paying attention. All these people are dying. All these people are fleeing. And the problem with these images are, and the images of the children, which I chose not to show anymore, the images of Aylan Kurdi or Amran in Aleppo, the boy in the ambulance, or the boy that was washed up on the beach, and they become these viral moments, hashtag moments, save Syria. A lot of people donate, a lot of people care, but everybody moves on because there are so many other things going on in the world. And the problem with these images is that they just stop you and you can't really do anything after that. And what, in my experience, talking to people about Syria and how they feel, they'll tell you, and these are the people that care. I mean, we're not even talking about the people who don't care, but the people who care will say things like, I feel numb, I feel overwhelmed, I feel like helpless, I feel hopeless. There's nothing we can do in the face of such an extreme experience, and it really closes down the conversation. And what we really need is for the conversation to keep going and for people to be intervening even more to help. And so Syria has become defined by the words like war, by the word refugee, and Syria basically equals loss. But for Syrians like me and Syrians in the room, this is not what we know. This is the Syria that I know. This is Aleppo. This is when I was an architecture student. It's an image of Aleppo that I took from the top of the citadel, looking east on the old city. A lot of what you see in this picture does not exist anymore or has been extremely damaged. This is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It is also a UNESCO heritage site, and a lot of it has been lost. But this is the Aleppo that I know. And the Aleppo that I know is my grandmother's house, Nana's house, in the Sabil neighborhood in Aleppo, where her house really gathered our entire family, my aunts, my cousins. This is the balcony that we used to sit on every single morning and drink coffee with her, and it's a place that's extremely important to my family and to our collective memory. And this is an image of one of her china cabinets, and really it's an image of just a collection of items and things that we've all left behind in our homes that we'll never see again, and really how, you know, like all of our homes, things that people collect and organize in a special way, and every single piece has a meaning and a story, and that really is what Syria is to me. Syria equals home, and home equals Aleppo. And if you're from a place that like Aleppo or like Damascus or all the other very old places in Syria, literally thousands of years old, it's very hard to define yourself there. When I was growing up in Aleppo, and not just me, everybody from Aleppo, everybody from Damascus, or Homs, or all of the other cities in Syria, you understand that the history of the country is much, much longer than your lifespan. And so you have this understanding that you'll never be able to actually make a change on your own city or on your own country. It just exists so much longer than you. And that was a big misconception, to be able to have lived through these 8 years of real horror and understand how fragile our countries are and how our cities are and how war can change really everything so quickly, is a big part of, you know, a learning experience for Syrians, and something that's very traumatic and something that we will have to process for many generations. This is a tourist map of Aleppo, and it's something that I had from when I used to live there. It's, you know, your regular tourist map of the city, the different locations, how you navigate yourself, how you orient yourself, and it's very neutral. And this is also something that you'd never think that this, you know, basic map doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't even make sense anymore that this was an Aleppo that actually didn't have an eastern and western side. It was just one city with its streets and all of its locations, just like any other. Very different from these maps of late 2016 during the fight for Aleppo between the regime and the opposition, and these were the kinds of maps that would show up on my Twitter feed and on social media and then in the news, and it was all about, red versus green, and where are the battle lines, and people that were commenting on this have never even been to Aleppo and didn't know what this means when a line would shift from one location to the other. It means that there are people's homes and people's families and people's schools and all of that, and I call them very cruel maps of the city that have nothing to do with the actual people who live there, and we forget about what lives beyond these different colors. And nothing prepares you to have to write articles. I wrote over 70 articles about Syria from 2011 to 2018, and one of them during the fall of Aleppo, writing about what the experience is like to watch your city being destroyed. So maps for me were a really big part of my education, my interests. Ever since I was in university in Aleppo, I collected maps and drew maps. And for my thesis, after RISD, I went to MIT, and for my thesis at MIT, I really was thinking about public space in Syria and collecting what I call memory maps from different people in my family and friends about a specific place in Aleppo called Sahat Sadallah Jabri, which is a central square. And what I realized is that when you ask people to draw maps of their home or maps of their city, they begin to add on all of these layers of meaning to their maps. And what I love about these maps is that they collapse time and they add on elements of your experience and tell stories that otherwise would not appear on a regular map. And so in the past year, I've started to do this myself again with floor plans of my home, my grandmother's home of Aleppo, and you really do this as an exercise of drawing my memory, drawing the stories, remembering moments of my experience growing up in Syria, and using that as a tool for memory and for also preservation. And so this is also something that I've done many times with Syrian refugee kids in camps and refugee schools since 2013. And today we are actually going to do this exercise together as a group. And we're going to be drawing a memory map, and that's why you have your paper and your pencils or pens. And I will be drawing the map of my home in Aleppo to show you. You're all going to be architects now for the next 10 minutes. And so we will start. Can I speak without the mic for a little bit? Okay, great. So if we're going to be drawing right here. For a second. Yeah, you can turn the lights on. And so, if you know how to draw a floor plan, basically a floor plan is if we slice the top of this building off and look down and saw the different spaces, that's basically what a floor plan is. It's an architectural drawing. And I'm going to draw for you the floor plan, if that can work here, of my home in Aleppo. So in Aleppo, we lived on the 3rd floor. It's pretty typical in a dense city that you don't have a garden unless you live on the ground floor. And so to get into our apartment, we have a flight of stairs that we would go up. We were at the top floor, so it was not a tall building. And you go upstairs, and there were 2 double doors that enter. And then here is the central space, which is our kitchen. And it was essential to us where we would spend a lot of our time as a family in the kitchen. And this is the area where my mother used to cook. And our sink here, and here is the window, right here. And then there was a large balcony that wrapped around the space. And here was a table where we used to sit for lunch. The main meal in Syria would be lunch. I'd sit here with my mother and my father and my brother and my other brother, and we would spend a lot of time here. And in here is the space that's pretty typical to Syria, maybe here a little bit, but more in Syria is the area where the Zuluf came. It was just basically the salon where we never were allowed to go in as kids. We did not understand why, but it's
it's where like the best furniture is and the most space is, but we didn't spend much time here. And it would be for when people would come visit, and we also had 2 double doors that go into this space, and here there would be a big dining table, and this is where our extended family would come on special occasions like Eid, which is like our Christmas, and different kinds of occasions. And here was our formal living room, and with their fancy furniture. And here was another piece here. And this is where people would come and visit when we'd have visitors. And this area of the house becomes all about, and it was definitely not this long, it becomes all about our daily lives. So here we had our 2 bedrooms. One is for my brothers and one is for my parents, and then my room was right here. And I shared my room with my grandmother when she got older. And I also had a drawing table right here and a desk, and this is where I learned I learned Arabic when I first moved back from America, and I also was able to study all of those years in school. And here there was a big balcony where we also spent a lot of time with family, because it's so hot in Aleppo and you have to have your balcony because that's kind of your only outdoor space. And there was a long balcony here that mimics this balcony in front. So the whole front of the house had this long balcony. It was pretty narrow. And this is my brother's room, both of my brothers, and my middle brother, Muhammad Ali. Until now, he's 38 and still complains that he had to share a room with his brother. He thinks that that's why he turned out the way he did, but middle child syndrome. And my parents' room is right here. And I used to love my parents' room so much because my father, when he'd come back from the office, he would come and sit in the room, and my mom would be fixing our meal, and he would sit in his room. He'd be so tired after seeing so many patients, and he would say, "Step into my office." And now sometimes I do that with my kids too, and they don't get it, but it's really fun because it's some of those little things that stick with you. And here is the living room where mere mortals are allowed to spend time and sit, and we would watch TV, and we spent a lot of time here too. So this is kind of like the layout of my home. I'm going to give you guys about 5-7 minutes to draw your own. It can be any home. It could be home of the past, home of the present, home of the future, and just be creative and really think about the different spaces and the stories that happen there.
Which was for me and my brother. My dad bought 2 beds, and he got the carpenter to craft the letter W on it, and W is Walid, and M is Muhammad, my brother. And so when we had the rest of my siblings, they were pretty jealous about that. And so here's the more living room, and here's the salon, the balcony, and we had a pretty big kitchen as well. I used to really like how the sun came into our house, because in Aleppo it's a lot of apartment complexes that are, surrounded by a lot of other buildings. So the windows in the kitchen were very high, and the sun, like around sunset, would just pierce in. It would look very pretty. Yeah, so that's about it.
And one more person? Non-Syrian, I'm going to choose. Come on, one person, come on.
Can you just volunteer?
Yes, okay, that's good. You volunteer, come on.
Okay, so mine's not much of an old memory. Mine's my current home here in Evansville. I'm from Northern Kentucky, but I like my home right now because it's my first house that I actually paid for pretty much on my own with a little help of my parents. But anyway, So like Waleed said, he likes how his windows are in his house. I also like the way that the windows are in our house. It makes me really happy to open our blinds and just have natural light shine in. I live with 3 other lovely women, one being Alyssa, and 2 other who I am in physical therapy school with. And we have some pretty open space in our kitchen and our dining room, which is where we usually gather and talk about our day and other kinds of nonsense. But I'd say it's a home full of happiness and sometimes stress, but mostly happiness and a lot of laughter and a lot of eating as well. So.
Current homes are important too. Does anybody else want to share? Okay, so if you'd like to share after, definitely we can talk about it. If you want to post your drawing, you can use #MemoryMap, and that way I'll see it on Instagram and we can talk about it later. And if you want to continue drawing, definitely I encourage that. Maybe we can lower the lights again. And so I've done this workshop with so many Syrian kids, probably hundreds of them, since 2013. I've done it inside camps, in schools that are tent schools, in refugee schools, and every single time it's a different experience. And every single time, the kids are different and drawing different things because they have been displaced for a longer amount of time, and it depends on their age. And so what I learned very quickly is that I draw always my home, but what I encourage the kids to do is to draw their homes in the future and where they're going to live, because with time it became too traumatic to remember, and also some kids didn't even remember Syria at all anymore. And so we draw our homes in the future, and this particular story that I'm going to tell you about in this classroom, it's a classroom of 5th graders in 2015, in a town called Reyhanli, which is a town that is right on the Turkish and Syrian border. It's in southern Turkey, 2 or 3 miles away from the border of Syria. And it's a town that we worked in at Karam Foundation for since 2012. And it's a town that used to have 60,000 Turkish citizens that were from the town, and 120,000 Syrians resettled into it over time. And so it's a situation where the town doubled in size after the war. And so there's many Syrian refugee schools there. In this classroom of 5th graders, that day, I don't know, we changed things up and we became urban planners instead of architects. And so we drew our ideal cities. Of course, my ideal city is Aleppo. And so I drew Aleppo, and I told them about, how you have to have a landmark in a city where everybody knows, you orient yourself around it. The Citadel in Paris, it would be the Eiffel Tower. In Reyhanli, it's their town. I don't know what it is here in Evansville, but this kind of like central location. Then you have your streets, your houses, your hospitals, your schools, everything that makes an ideal city. And so the kids started to draw afterwards their ideal cities in the future. And very small classrooms that were crammed with over 50 kids. As I was walking between the desks and seeing the kids' drawings, first of all, they were inventing ways to draw. They were using edges of their books as rulers, anything round that they had to make circles. They were drawing very wide streets, happy families, all of these kinds of towers and inventions and all these kind of cool things. But what I noticed is that a lot of them had their cities on the edge of the water, like on an ocean or a sea, and then they had these little triangular things all across the edge, and I didn't know what they were, and I asked somebody, one of the kids, and he looked at me like, "What's wrong? How do you not know what this is?" And I asked, "What is that?" And he said, "That's the refugee camp." And I was really shocked because even in their ideal cities, even in their imagination, they couldn't imagine a city that they would go to that would not have a refugee camp. And that was actually a big learning experience for me, is that you can say draw in the future, but you can't take away everything from their own experience. But it's really incredible to do this workshop with kids. They are very proud when they stand in front of the classroom and talk about their drawings and talk about their designs and everything that they envision for the future. And what's really important about this is that home becomes something, for these kids, home is not something that's in the past. It's not something that what I grew up with my grandmother about home being Aleppo, home being your roots, where you're from. It really is about where you're going. And that shift from being able to imagine, from memory to imagination, is the shift of being able to survive being a refugee. And I think it's extremely important. And these kids know how to do that. And these kinds of drawing tools and these exercises really become a part of survival. So for them, Syria is really a question mark, and home is a question mark. It's something that is happening as they actually live it. Again in 2015, in a different school, on a different mission while we were working in Rayhanli, I had another encounter with a Syrian teen that really changed my viewpoint and on how we were supposed to work. And this one was in a room of Syrian refugee boys. They were 15, 16 years old, and we were talking to them about their futures. And one boy named Ali told me something that really changed my mind of how I think forever. And because, we go in and you're thinking, we're so hopeful, maybe the students here relate to that, you have to learn English, you have to learn Turkish, you have to do this, we can apply to university. And we're talking about all these big moves that you have to do for your future. And he looked at me and he said, at that time it was 2015, and the revolution began in 2011. And so he said to me, 4 years for somebody like you is nothing, but 4 years for me is a lifetime. And I really began to think hard about how time is just passing in a whole other way for Syrian youth. That it's not just about, for somebody like me, okay, if the war ends in 5 years, if the war ends in 10 years, eventually we'll go back. But time for the youth and the young adults, all of that every single year just means your future is being delayed, and to a point where maybe you're not even going to have the future that you actually deserve and your potential. And so we began to think at Karam Foundation, what can we do for kids like Ali? What can we do for these people who are living through this, and that time is running out and we have to intervene for boys and for girls, because intervening at this age means the difference between going to university and not, the difference between being in an early marriage or not, or being forced into doing manual labor for the rest of your life because you didn't have the opportunity. And so we knew there was no time to waste. And so we began to think about the actual crisis in a whole other way, and in different ways than what we saw before with the images of despair and how humanitarian aid agencies want to give, just a little bit to a lot of people, thinking a food basket is going to solve something. We wanted to think about different questions and different ways of defining Syrians. So we started asking different questions, like for instance, what if we considered what would happen if you gave every Syrian refugee teen the tools and technology to succeed? And what if all of them believed in their ideas and believed in their creativity and had the confidence to actually pursue their visions? And what if we were able to provide a space for Syrian refugee teens and mentors for them from the community to actually teach them and help them develop their skills for the future? And if this place had every single technology tool, that is possible for them to be able to actually build and make their ideas and imagine them and see them become realities. And so we built this place, and actually now there's 2 places, called Karam House. And I'm going to be showing a short video about what Karam House is. So Karam House that we have now in Reyhanli and in Istanbul is a place, like you saw, for Syrian refugee teens, ages 14 to 18, boys and girls. We have about 50% attendance for boys and girls, and our staff is completely made of Syrians. We hire young Syrian professionals in Turkey who are refugees themselves, architects and engineers and teachers, and we train them to teach and do the programming. And so we really believe that people from the community should be serving the community. The doors are open also for Turkish kids, so we do have some Turkish kids who attend. And it's a really magical place. It's a place where it's not a school. They come after and before school and on the weekends, and they spend a lot of their time. It's a design-based curriculum that we developed with a partner called Nouveau Studio out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Nouveau Studio partners in the US are really elite schools that have access to maker spaces and these kinds of things. So this is the first time this curriculum is actually being delivered for free to the most vulnerable of communities, as well as in Arabic, and also to teenagers. And so we're really excited about the possibilities of this, and I'm going to show you some of the images of the kids with their projects. So this is Yusuf holding his project, and he wanted us to get them a GoPro, and I said no. And so we actually made this skateboard with this moving mechanism so that when they use it, it actually moves and creates a GoPro-like effect. They design projects for real-world situations. So these are two girls who they were part of designing a prosthetic limb, which was actually done in virtual exchange with a Nouveau school in Florida. So two Syrian kids, two American kids worked together to design a new prosthetic, and this is they're modeling this, and it was for 5 real cases in Reyhanli of people that are either amputees or have had paralysis. And so they had to work with people to actually design something for them. And that's a huge part of our curriculum, as well as teaching the kids that they have to have the agency to change the world around them and have that confidence to do so. And so here are some more kids modeling their inventions. They actually learn how to present this in writing, in drawing, in film. They have an online portfolio where they document all of their work. And it's really basically like going to architecture school, surprise. And that's what we do with them. And they learn all of these skills like graphic design, all different kinds of soft skills that will help them get a job in the future. And so one of the things that they're working on now, also they wanted a drone, and so now we told them to build a drone themselves. And here is one of the videos of one of their models. They've been working on this for 6 months in groups, and this is one of the designs that they have for a drone. And this is in one of our spaces in Reyhanli. So, I mean, I really love this video because you just hear their enthusiasm, and it's not something that's natural to them. It's not at all. It's something where they had to learn that. They had to learn that it's okay to fail, and not that it's only okay to fail, that it's necessary to fail. I mean, even for me growing up in Syria way before the war, and I'm sure Syrians in the room can relate to this, is that failure is not an option, and you only have one shot. You have one shot in when you're in high school to determine what you're going to be, and you have one shot in university. And so it's always about that one test or that one thing that will determine everything in your fate. And so growing up in a system like that, and on top of it being displaced and living in a new community with a new language, and having that pressure, and actually somebody coming and saying, no, actually you do have to fail, you have to design it 20 times before it's even worth anything, and it's not going to be right, and that's okay. And that's a revolutionary thought for them. Even the people that we bring, guest mentors come from all around the world. So many American people have come, and people from Europe, and not just, you know, Arabs or Syrians, and they'll come and say, you know, I'm an artist today, but I used to be a writer, I used to be a dentist, and then I do this, and they look at them and they're like, you can actually change your mind, and that is part of that building up the world of possibilities to them. So you'll see a lot of kids when they come will say we all want to be doctors, but now they'll say different things. Like Batul, who I met in January this year, she's 15, and when I asked her what she wants to be when she grows up, she said she wanted to be an artificial intelligence engineer. And I was shocked that she even knew what that was. And this is a girl growing up in a place that's so close to the border, sometimes at night you can hear the bombs, and this is her dream. And she talks here about what Karam House means to her, and she's really amazing. And I asked her to define what Karam House is to somebody who doesn't know it, and she said, it's easy, Karam House is all of our dreams in one place. And I thought, okay, we need to hire you for marketing. But that's how they feel about this place. This is Yusuf, and this is Karam House Istanbul, and Yusuf is really special because he was one of the kids that we had in Reyhanli, and he was very sad one day, and he was telling everybody that I'm sad because my parents decided to move to Istanbul, and if I go there, there's no Karam House. And then our staff was able to tell him that actually we're building another one in Istanbul. And I was there on opening day at the end of September last year, and he was there too that night, and he attends Karam House, and we were able to provide for this one person continuity, which is so important. And what he says is that there should be a Karam House wherever there are Syrian kids. And that's really what our goal is to be. And so our goal is to build 10,000 leaders in the next 10 years from these kids that we work with. We want to grow and be in Lebanon and Jordan. We really would love to be in Syria one day. We believe that this is how we can make an impact on the future. And this is an image of a group of kids in Karam House Reyhanli, and in the screen you see the kids at Nouveau Studio in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and this is during one of their virtual exchange sessions. And I love this image because it really talks about a very specific point, which is, for all those of you who have followed Syria from the beginning, one thing that we used to hear right from the beginning of the revolution in 2011 is that you'd see these protests and people would say, well, what is the alternative? What is the alternative to Assad? What is the alternative to this? What is and as if there's no other alternative out of the 24 million Syrians. And it's a very offensive question, because it just means that out of all of the people that existed and still exist, that there's no other group of people who have the imagination, the capacity, and innovation to lead. And that's actually not true. We lost so many of the people that had that capability, and we actually still have so many people. And these kids represent that alternative future for Syria and what could still become the future. And that's what that represents to me, is that we know that we can't stop the war, but we can actually build a future. And you guys here, your 23 students here, that's part of that too, part of that leadership for the future. So we asked the kids at Karam House, the same question I asked Batul, how would you define Karam House to somebody who doesn't know it? And you can see here, a lot of them say Karam House is home, Karam House is second home, where I discover my skills. And for me, the best one is this one. It says, Innahu kul shay, it is everything, and Karam House is everything, and that's exactly what our intention has been. If we go back to the roots of even what Karam means, which means generosity, and so this is extreme generosity in action, and it's something that I have not seen in our experiences with humanitarian aid agencies that believe that it's okay to build refugee camps and tell people that you're going to live here for 17 years. as we've seen, or that it's okay to you get to Greece and we still have families that have been separated now for 5 or 6 years and counting. And these kinds of things that happen to Syria are not okay at all. And I think that the Syrian people really redefined what it means to be in a humanitarian crisis and acted themselves and inspired others to do differently. And so this is what we want to do as well, and do things differently and in a very humane way, which is to give everything to those who've lost everything. And so this is Karam House in Istanbul. It used to be an embassy, and it's an area called Eyüp Sultan, so it's not in the trendy area of Istanbul where sometimes you see things happening for Syrians where there actually are no Syrians living. It's in an area where there's many Syrians living, but it is a beautiful building because we believe that the kids that come here deserve to come in, and they come in with their heads held high and know that they're there to learn and to become and belong. And I'm going to, and this is very important, is that this is what the most important lesson that Syrian kids have taught me, is that home is not the past, and home is not where I'm from and the roots. It's not only that home is a verb, and it's something that we are in the process of making our home all the time, and we are in the process of discovering it and creating it with our own actions. And it's just like that bag of clay where you're shaping it and creating it as you go along with your vision and your imagination. You participate in making home. And before I end, this is one of my favorite images. This is a girl named Layla, and here she is at Karam House, and she's building her model. And the reason why I love this image so much is because it reminds me of myself and that first image of myself at RISD. And because I know that feeling, and I can see it from her eyes, and her posture is that she is in the process right now of her brain is being rewired. Her brain is changing, and she doesn't even know it. And that's a really powerful thing. She didn't have to be somebody who had privilege like me, that my parents were able to send me to America, that I was already even born here to be American and have that opening in my life to be able to, that chance. She has the same chance, she has this opportunity, and that's what we want to do for kids like her and Batul and for Ali and Yusuf and all of the kids that we work with. And that's a really important thing to remember, that we are all in the process of making home, and we're all on this journey together. And I think that you all understand this at a deep level because of what you've done in this community. And so I really thank you for everything that you've done. And just the one last thing is that if you take your pieces of paper and you hold them in your hand, and you think about, I don't know which homes you drew, whether it's the home of your past or the home that you live in now that you'll be going to after this event, is that just imagine for a moment that if you had, that was the only thing of home that you had left, if this was, all you had left was the memory. That's exactly how it is for over 12 million Syrians who've lost their homes in the past 8 years. So I ask you to think about home and think about how we create home for others and how we make home for others. And you've done that wonderfully as a community, and I hope you inspire others to do so, in other towns and other universities, to actually open up their homes for refugees and marginalized communities and all of the people that need it, like these kids, because it really does make a difference. And you're living proof of that. Thank you.
Many people have said this phrase to me. You must be very lucky you did not live through the crisis that happened in Syria. I usually nod with agreement, because how could they really know what I really lived through? However, to be honest, there are some times where I did wish that I did live through the crisis. Because I wanted to feel what my country and my people felt. Because that is the least thing I could have contributed to the war. I want to talk about the story of every Syrian at my age. So that's how it probably started, with the phrase, pack your bags. But don't pack everything, because we will be back. That's what most people thought, that soon everything would be better, and that soon we will be back. Even though we all knew the facts. This is where it all started to me. I moved to Qatar in 2011, or rather I should say, I left Syria in 2011, because it really did not matter where I went. All that mattered to me is that I left. I did not just leave a land. I left my memories, my family, my room, and everything that defined who I am. And then I went on and took bits and pieces of everything and everyone that I encountered in the past 8 years. That is who I am today. That is who every Syrian is today. We are just bits and pieces of everything. We did not lose a land, we lost an identity. The second thing that I'm lucky about is the fact that at least I have some memories I can hang on to. That there are children who opened their eyes to a world falling apart. I stopped myself from seeing destruction pictures of Syria every single day, because I want to keep the images of the streets I walked through as beautiful as it once was. I do not want to ruin the memories I have left, because that is all I have. And now we are all living in the search of somewhere to call home. My father has been putting all his free time into thinking of what should become of us and where should we go. He's still worried, but not about himself. His only dream is to provide a home for us, a home where he does not exist in. I have been living in the past 8 years in an unstable state with the questions of who should I be and where should I go. But finding a home was not the only problem. The problem is the things I leave behind. When I left Syria, I left my family, cousins, aunts, grandparents, friends, and my childhood memories. And here I am today, repeating the same mistake. I'm leaving Qatar and I'm leaving the last pieces of me there, my parents. Yes, I might be finding a home now, but this home means nothing without the people I love in it. The fact that my parents cannot even attend my graduation takes away the taste of gratefulness of being a graduate. I once was walking through the streets of Turkey to be surprised by a little kid asking for money. He had only one hand as he lost the other during war in Syria. At that moment, I did not know what to feel. Should I be sad for him or happy that I'm not him? I'm lost between stopping myself from being happy, because how could I be with all the suffering happening in the place I call home? And from being sad, because how could I be while I do not even have the right to? Because there are people out there who lived through hell while I was given gold on a plate. Syrians at my age never really looked like other people. Their dreams were limited to achieving the basic needs of living, like sleeping, being warm, and putting food on the table. It's like time has stopped on March 15th of 2011, when the war began. And not only time has stopped, but to make it worse, all doors were shut in our faces. There are about 6 million who left the country. Most are located in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, about 1.5 million in Germany, and the rest are around Europe and the US. But are they really living is the question. In Germany, most families consisting of at least 5 members are living in a single room with shared bathrooms. They're finding it very hard to adapt to different culture and with people of different religion who speak a different language. The point is, most people stop dreaming. All they look forward to is to live through the day. That's the misery my people have been living through. So please, do not only donate money, but donate love. Because there are people out there who weren't only physically hurt, but psychologically. Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Walid. I'm the co-founder of Scholars for Syria with Gail and Gabriella. And I wanted to take this opportunity today. First of all, I want to mention that I think it's a really great and befitting time to hold this event. That's on the same day that the people of Sudan got their freedom. And I think that's a huge glimmer of hope for us people who are also protesting and asking for our freedom. To see fellow Muslims, fellow Arabs, fellow humans gain their freedom. And that we really hope the process out there works the most peaceful way. I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about the behind the scenes of Scholars for Syria. You know, we have a lot of familiar faces here, and you guys come and see the product of a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings, a lot of running around, a lot of panicking. And I think it's important to know who's behind this and what type of person wants to volunteer in this work, and if you are that person. And so first of all, I'll talk about how I got involved in this work. When I was a sophomore here at the University of Evansville, things were pretty good. You know, I came all across the globe. I'm succeeding in an institution in a foreign country. At 19, really, there's not much to be upset about. But yet, if you put it in the context of what's happening, the people who look like me, speak like me, come from the same area that I'm from, have the same accent, you know, they're having the most horrific times of their lives. You know, the cities are being decimated. The futures are being torn apart. The families are disappearing. And I'm here, you know, struggling with professors and, you know, work-life balance and being a college kid. So you have this constant anxiety going through your blood, thinking, you know, is it even right for me to enjoy anything? And last week I was actually at an event for another Syrian activist. And she talked about something called survivor's guilt. That's it. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I've been constantly feeling. That's the uncomfortableness I dread every day. And back then I was like, I need to do something about this. And luckily I came into the company of people who were also motivated to do things. And everybody was motivated for different reasons. Some were really interested in different cultures. All of us had a passion for activism. All of us wanted to make a difference in the world. You know, and some knew Syrians, some didn't. And with that, we came together. The first group was me, Gabriella, Gail, and Hannah. And we wanted to do something. We realized that this university has the biggest ratio of Syrian students to student body in the country, which is marvelous that it's in this small town in the Midwest where you'd think this is something that happened on either coast, you know, California or New York City. But it's happening here, and it's happening so well. The students come here, they assimilate quickly, most of them. They graduate, they're either in grad school or they're in top businesses. We wanted to capitalize on that. And the main thing we wanted to do is fight the excuse that it's too complicated. People would use that as a means of inactiveness. And while I don't know, I'm not going to claim it's not complicated, but I would say that the ways to help are much easier than people and more accessible than people think, you know. And when we get the co-founder here of Karam Foundation, when we have people from a different organization, the Syrian American Medical Society, you realize help might be a few clicks away. So how is that going to look? We wanted, first of all, to explain what's going on in Syria. We thought we'd have a lecture series. We'd bring in experts on their area and how it relates to Syria. And we had a lineup first year about xenophobia, Islam, politics, the history, and it worked out very well. We had a lot of interest, people were coming together, people were talking, had a discussion, but you know, our appetites weren't fed by any means. We were even working harder than we ever could have. And so we went about the next year, how we're going to do more. Realized the Syrians on campus, just like I was alluding to, their life isn't as you know, as flowery as people would think. A lot of them were struggling with tuition. And struggling with tuition, you're just struggling to stay at school. When if you're not in school, but you're on a student visa in the US, that's a huge risk. You know, you don't want to get in trouble with the immigration department in this country. And so we went about raising money through the scholarship dinner. We held this huge event in the mosque where people came together, and a lot of donors showed up, especially from the business community, and we racked up a good amount of money that helped these students continue for a few semesters until they can get on their feet. And then we also decided that we're going to go into high schools. We're going to send Syrian students, and they're going to talk about their area of expertise in high schools, not their area of expertise, the topic of the class and how it relates to Syria and to them. And that was a huge success as well. In hindsight, we first had this impression that the high school students are going to be naive. And you'd think that with that age demographic, what's your worldview at that point? But the amount of very structured, strong questions you received and the curiosity, really satisfied us, and it made the whole experience much more fulfilling. And so we were working well on that front. For the following year, we wanted to go even bigger. We wanted the lecture series to symbolize stronger things. We wanted to pull in Syrian activists, people who have stories to tell that, that are gut-wrenching stories. Let's put things in perspective here. And we were able to pull in money from the Student Congress, and we had some of the most interesting talks. We had one person from the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission of Refugees, who played the violin as well. And she came straight from Aleppo, extremely strong networking person, and she's just magnificent, the amount of trials she had to go beyond to be here. We had another person who her father has been detained in Syria and still is for over 1,000 days. And to see how, strong that person is and how resilient and how successful she is and how she can put things in such strong perspective, I felt like that made an impact. And this is the final presentation we have. We have the founder of the Karam Foundation because we thought it would be befitting to start having a conversation of what's next for Syria. The war isn't over, but the people are out of the country. It went from 23 million to 13 million. People have lives outside of this. How do we rebuild for the Syrian youth? I mean, if you went through this war when you were in middle school, chances that you ever reach high school or college, very low. And so I hope this gave you some perspective on the operation that goes on, how we put these things together. Final thing I would like to say about what I learned in this experience is that with activism, you're gonna need to be extremely resilient, extremely passionate, extremely patient, and you need to have a strong perspective because it's not going to be about the amount of shirts we sold or attendees at an event or likes on Facebook. That's never going to measure our true impact. The fact that we made 1 hour of someone's life this much better, who's living in extreme chaos, is what we measure ourselves against. Because we're a small organization with limited resources. But we put in a lot of effort, and that did contribute into making someone's life this much better, and we take great pride in that. So thank you.
We'd like to thank you so much for coming out this evening. Please join us down here if you have any questions or commentary.
And I just wanted to say about this book, first of all, thank you so much. We need to give them another round of applause. I'm really proud of all three of you for congratulations on your graduation. I just wanted to say a couple words about this book. It's a project that 4 people did. I was part of this group with Kinan Rahmani. I don't know if he's been here before, and Nada Hashim and Aya Saman. And this was something that was done just as a marker for 2014 for the first 100,000 people who were killed in Syria. We read the names with a group of many Syrians and non-Syrians in front of the White House for 72 hours straight, and we produced this book, which is volume 1. There's been at least 500,000 people who lost their lives in Syria, and so this documents the names and where they're from and how they died of the first 100,000. And brought this book as a gift to the library of the university in hopes that future people, kids and students will look at it and remember, and also remember your contribution, that you were not silent during this time and you stood with and stand with the Syrian people. So this is from the How Many More group. Thank you.